Hello everyone. Today in this video lecture we are going to study about humerus bone. Firstly, in an animal where this humerus bone is present. So let me tell you, humerus bone is the part of forelimb. Humerus bone is the part of forelimb, and humerus bone is present in the arm region. If you can observe your arm, so where the biceps brachialis muscle is, triceps muscle is there, so that is your arm region. Similarly, in case of an animal, the arm region comprises of a bone which is known as humerus. So firstly you should know where humerus is present. So humerus is present in the forelimb of an animal, in the in the arm region. Now, how this humerus bone looks, what are its surfaces, what it comprises of, and what are the muscles which are attached to this humerus bone. So there are four surfaces of the humerus bone. The first surface you can see is the anterior surface. Before going to into the detail of the surface, let me tell you more about something more about humerus bone. Humerus bone is a long bone. It is a long bone, so it would have a shaft. So this is the shaft region, the cylindrical region, and it possesses two extremities. This extremity towards the junction of the body is the proximal extremity, and this extremity away from the junction of the body is the distal extremity. So humerus is a long bone present in the forelimb at arm region. It comprises of two extremities and shaft, which is also known as epiphyses, and these extremities are known as diaphyses. Now, how you will, so there were four surfaces of humerus bone: anterior surface, posterior surface, lateral surface, and medial surface. Now, how you will recognize this anterior surface and all the surfaces? So let me tell you one by one about these surfaces. For anterior surface, firstly, what is anterior surface? Anterior surface is a surface which is present on the, or we can say anterior surface is that surface which is present towards the head region of the animal. So this particular region would be present towards the head of the animal. So how you will recognize that this surface would be the cranial surface or anterior surface? So for that you have to see this fossa. This fossa in the distal extremity is known as coronoid fossa. What are the fossa? Fossas are the depressions. So this depression in the proximal extremity is known as coronoid fossa, as I have also mentioned here. So the region where this coronoid fossa would be present, that surface would be the anterior surface or cranial surface. Okay, now how you would recognize the posterior surface? There are two things to get the posterior surface, or you can say the caudal surface, or the surface which point towards the tail region. One is the head region. Head region will always be towards the tail region, as well as this fossa. This is the olecranofossa. You can see this depression, this is the olecranofossa. So wherever in case of humerus this olecranofossa would be present, that surface would be the posterior surface or caudal surface. Okay, as I mentioned, olecranofossa, as well as the head. The region where this head would be present, it would be the posterior surface or caudal surface. Now, in case of lateral surface, there is, what is the lateral surface? Lateral surface is that surface which is away from the median plane of the body. If this is the median plane of the body, so this would be the lateral surface, and this which is close to the medial body, it would be the medial surface. Okay, so lateral surface would be recognized by this particular tuberosity. This tuberosity is known as deltoid tuberosity. So wherever we would have this deltoid tuberosity, that surface would be the lateral surface. And in case of medial surface is that surface which points towards the medial junction of the body. So here we can find a rough surface which forms a tubercle. So this tubercle, or we can say these projections which form this tubercle are known as teres tubercle. So wherever the teres tubercle would be present, it would be the medial surface. So this was all about the recognition of the surfaces, or a determination of the surfaces, or identification of the surfaces. For anterior surface, you have to see the where is the coronoid process. For posterior surface, you have to see the olecranofossa as well as the head, and for lateral surface, you have to see the tuberosity, that is deltoid tuberosity, and for the medial surface, you have to see the teres tubercle. Now, as I also mentioned, if this is a particular animal, so here in the arm region you will find the humerus bone. It is present in the forelimb in the arm region. It is placed obliquely downwards. You can see here it is placed obliquely. This is not, it is not horizontally or vertically, it is obliquely, and it is slightly downwards and backwards also, as you can see in the animal. Anatomy becomes easy when you see a lot of diagrams and pictures. That's why I made these notes and come to you at your disposal with these notes. So it is also long bone, as I mentioned. It would be having two extremities and a shaft, you know. Now in case of humerus, you can see that above it articulates with scapula. You can see this is the scapula bone, and below it articulates with radius and ulna. As I mentioned, it possesses a shaft and two extremities. It is the shaft and these are the two extremities. So you can see this is the lateral view of the humerus. In lateral view, you have this deltoid tuberosity. Deltoid tuberosity. And what are these? These are lateral tuberosities. These are the lateral tuberosities. I will discuss this in detail, but let me first explain you all these pictures. This is teres tubercle, so it would be medial surface. It is head and olecranofossa, so it would be caudal surface. Here you can see the coronoid process, so it would be the cranial view. Okay, and proximal extremity is this and distal is this. How you will recognize proximal and distal extremity? Proximal extremity would be having the head region, and the distal extremity would be having olecranofossa, condyles and epicondyles. These would be discussed in the video clearly, but firstly let me tell you about the shaft. Shaft is twisted with four surfaces. As I discussed, the anterior surface is triangular and possesses a coronoid fossa. This is the coronoid fossa. You can see it is also triangular surface kind of a thing is present here in the anterior surface, and a coronoid fossa. For posterior surface, there is a nutrient foramen in the distal 1/3. If I will go to the down, this is the nutrient foramen in the distal 1/3. This is the distal region of the posterior surface. How I got to know that this is the posterior surface? By this olecranofossa, and this is nothing but the nutrient foramen. So via seeing the nutrient foramen, you can also recognize the posterior or caudal surface. Olecranofossa is present at distal end. As you can see, this is the olecranofossa. Now medial surface possesses teres tubercle. This is the medial surface and this is the teres tubercle. And teres major muscle get inserted here. There is a muscle in the humerus bone known as teres major muscle. This teres major muscle get inserted to this teres tubercle, which is present on the medial surface. Okay. Now moving forward, in the lateral surface, there is a insertion of a lot of muscle. So let me discuss it for you. So it possesses a musculospiral groove. What is this musculospiral groove? If I will tell you, this is a diagram. So this is the musculospiral groove. You can see this is a groove like region. What is this groove? It is also a depression, but a shallow depression. Okay, so it is forming a groove here, a depression. This is musculospiral groove, and in this musculospiral groove there is a muscle known as brachialis muscle. Which muscles get lodged here? Brachialis muscle. I will repeat it for you. Brachialis muscle get lodged here. Also, there is this tuberosity is deltoid tuberosity. And how I got to know? So if this is deltoid tuberosity, so which surface would be it? It would be lateral surface. Now this lateral tuberosity, deltoid tuberosity is present anterior to musculospiral groove. This is the anterior region. How this is anterior region? Because here it is coronoid fossa. So this is musculospiral groove. So anterior to this musculospiral groove, we would be having deltoid tuberosity. And via this deltoid tuberosity, which muscle get attached? Deltoid muscle. If this is deltoid tuberosity, and via deltoid tuberosity, deltoideus muscle or deltoid muscle get attached. Above to this deltoid tuberosity, here you can see this region, this marked region as I showed here. This is nothing but deltoid ridge. Which ridge? Deltoid ridge. This is the deltoid ridge. And via this deltoid ridge, triceps brachialis muscle get attached. Which muscle get attached to the deltoid ridge? Triceps brachialis muscle get attached, and above to this deltoid ridge there is a tubercle via which teres minor muscle get attached, and teres major muscle was getting attached to teres tubercle which was present on the medial surface. Okay, now there is a note that anconeus muscle lodges in the olecranofossa. If this is the olecranofossa, which muscle lodges here? Anconeus muscle. So let me repeat it for you. Deltoid tuberosity lodges, or we can say there is a muscle inserted here in the deltoid tuberosity known as deltoideus muscle or deltoid muscle. Triceps brachialis muscle get lodged to deltoid ridge, and teres minor muscle get attached to tubercle which is above the deltoid ridge. Now proximal extremity is present towards the body junction, and it is voluminous, like it is heavy kind of a thing. It possesses three things. What are these three things? Articular head. This is the articular head. Lateral tuberosities. These are the lateral tuberosity. How I got to know these are lateral tuberosities? Because here deltoid tuberosity is present. Wherever there is deltoid tuberosity, that surface would be lateral. So these tuberosities on the proximal end would be lateral tuberosities. And in these lateral tuberosity towards the head region would be the posterior tuberosity, because head was posteriorly present in humerus bone, and this particular region anterior to posterior would be anterior. And if you can also recognize anterior tuberosity by seeing the coronoid fossa, and for medial tuberosity you can see this is the medial tuberosity, and medial tuberosity would be present just above the teres tubercle, and teres tubercle is present above the it is present on the medial surface. Now between these two tuberosities, lateral tuberosity and medial tuberosity, there is a groove. This groove is intertuberal groove, and this intertuberal groove commonly known as bicipital groove. Which groove? Bicipital groove. Now let me this is the bicipital groove, intertuberal groove. Now let me come to the lateral tuberosity. In the lateral tuberosity you would be having this anterior end is known as summit, and this anterior end of lateral tuberosity is large, and it rises an inch or more. This is the anterior end, and it rises an inch or more to the head or over the bicipital groove. This is the bicipital groove, and this summit, or we can say the head of this summit gets overhang to the bicipital groove, so it is a little more higher. It is in case of ox. When we will learn species difference, there we can find some differences also. Now in the anterior end of the lateral tuberosity is known as summit, and the posterior end is known as convexity. So this is the convexity and this is the summit. Summit give attachment to which muscle? Which muscle get inserted to summit region? That is supraspinatus muscle. And to this convexity, which muscles get inserted? Infraspinatus muscle. From where these supraspinatus muscle and infraspinatus muscle comes? They comes from the scapula region. Okay, scapula region. This is also a region, a circular region below this summit. This also insert this muscle. Which muscle? Infraspinatus muscle. Now for medial tuberosity, you will see medial tuberosity also has two ends, anterior end and posterior end. Now how you will recognize the anterior and posterior end? Anterior end would be towards the surface where coronoid fossa is present, and posterior end would be towards the surface where olecranofossa is present. Now posterior end, if you I will talk about the posterior end of medial tuberosity. It gives insertion or attachment to which muscle? Subscapularis muscle. Subscapularis muscle get attached or inserted to the posterior end of which tuberosity? Medial tuberosity. And to the anterior end, which muscle get attached? Supraspinatus muscle. Above, in the above, supraspinatus muscle get attached, and below it is deep pectoral muscle. So anterior end, in anterior end of medial tuberosity, which muscles get inserted? Deep pectoral muscle. And posterior end of medial tuberosity, there is an insertion of which muscle? Subscapularis muscle. When you will revise it twice or thrice, everything would be clear at your disposal. Now what was this bicipital groove? It was the groove between the two tuberosities, lateral and medial tuberosity. Generally it is covered by fibrocartilage, and there is a tendon of biceps brachialis muscle which passes from it. Now in case of distal tuberosities, we have two things, condyles and epicondyles. What are these? If I will talk about condyles, these are the large prominences which often provide structural support to the overlying hyaline cartilage. These are nothing but bones. Okay, and these provide what? Structural support. to warm hyaline cartilage. And what are these epicondyles? These are nothing but the prominence of which condyles, okay, as you can read also here. So condyle in anterior so in if in the distal extremity you would be having this condyles and epicondyles. Condyle would be present on the anterior surface and there is a coronoid fossa. So the condyle on the lateral surface is smaller and the condyle on medial surface is larger. How we divide this lateral and medial condyle? By an anterior posterior ridge which divides the two particular condyles into two parts. Now it receives coronoid process of radius during extreme flexion. Now what happens? There is this coronoid process when we do flexion. What is flexion? When we take our arm towards the biceps. Like this is our biceps, this is biceps and this is forearm. Like this is arm and this is forearm. When forearm is taken towards the arm, that is flexion. So during the flexion, the coronoid process of which bone? Radius bone get lodged to this coronoid fossa. Okay. Now this medial condyle is larger in size. Okay. Now anteriorly, if I will talk about the anteriorly, the distal extremity possesses coronoid fossa and posteriorly it possesses olecranofossa. This is the posterior of distal extremity. This is anterior of distal extremity. In the posterior, we would be having olecranofossa, and in the anterior, we would be having which fossa? Coronoid fossa. During flexion, what happens? What is flexion? Taking your forearm towards your arm, that is flexion. During flexion, the coronoid process of radius bone get inserted, or we can say comes to the coronoid process. And during extension, what is this extension? Extension is nothing but the movement of forearm away from the arm region. Okay, during extension what happens? There is a process, olecrano process in the ulna bone which is received by the olecranofossa. Now epicondyles. Now let me tell you about the epicondyles. These are the epicondyles on the posterior surface. We are having this medial epicondyle which gives origination to 5 muscles like flexor carpi radialis, pronator teres, carpi ulnaris, superficial digital flexor, and humeral head of deep digital flexor. And this lateral epicondyle give origin to which muscles tendon? Ulnaris lateralis. Okay. And in olecranofossa there is a muscle, enconius muscle, which you have learned. And there lateral to this lateral epicondyle there is a crest known as condylized crest. As you can see in this diagram also, this is condylized crest, and 3 muscles get originated here: extensor carpi radialis, common digital extensor, medial digital extensor. So this was all about the humerus bone. Hopefully you got the idea how you have to remember the humerus bone. Moreover, you have to remember one thing, that the muscles which were there, you have to mug up them, or you can do one thing, like you can write them twice or thrice, or you can watch the video lecture so that you can get an idea of the humerus bone. So this was all about the humerus